nothing left for me to hate, so I can lay me down, my brothers, on the ground. I bled today until Coyote comes to raise me up and carries me
Hello everybody, welcome to the Scottish Rugby podcast brought to you by the Scottish Rugby blog. I am Cammy Black. Joining me this evening, we on a momentous day for Scottish Rugby, which we'll get on to later on. I have John Anderson. Good evening, John.
Evening, folks.
And Ian Hay.
Howdy.
If you're watching this live, we're on YouTube, Periscope, which is on the Twitter, and Twitch. You can watch us live, and you can also download us on podcast apps as well and listen to the audio version of this afterwards. It's pretty much exactly the same. We do ramble on a little bit on this sometimes, and we can hit the we've not quite hit the 2 hour mark yet.
We weren't far off when I was hosting.
Yeah,
we were at an hour and 52, I think.
Yeah.
Was that just the pair of us as well?
Yeah.
Was that just the pair of us as well, Chris?
That was
sure there was a lot to discuss.
That was the one where I think I was having a lovely night in with the wife, but I'd said I'll stay up and I'll edit the podcast after we've finished. And I went to log on.
4 a.m.
I know. I went to log on to say, "Oh, that'll be them done. I'll download the audio file now," and you were still yammering away. But if you want an edited version of the podcast where we just get straight to the main talking points of the day, you can sign up to our Patreon. From £3 a month, if you go to patreon.com/Scottish Rugby Podcast, you get edited versions of the podcast where we strip out all the bits where we talk about my date nights.
They just go into the OnlyFans site.
That's it, yeah. And we kind of just focus on the main talking points, so you can sign up for that. You also get exclusive content. After we've recorded this tonight, we're going to do our first episode of Scotland's Hardest Players, and we're going to look at the 2010s and now. So it's going to be about 5 minutes, I think, to rattle through the hardest player of the 2010s. I'm guessing. We'll see how we go. But we're going to build up. We're going to go backwards. So we'll start now in 2010s and work our way backwards to the very beginning to give us time to do some proper research into that. So that's what you get if you sign up for the Patreon. If you pay £5 a month or more, we'll read your name out on the podcast as a thank you as well. We are also sponsored by Manscaped.com, who provide you with a wide range of gentlemen's grooming products, mainly focused on the downstairs area, it has to be said, but they also do nose trimmers as well. You can buy yourself some lovely aftershave as well, some ball toner, some ball deodorant, lovely bit of toiletry bag as well. So if you go to manscaped.com/Scottish Rugby, or you go to manscaped.com and put the code SRP in at the checkout, you'll get 20% off plus free shipping. Now, you notice they're everywhere, Manscaped, at the minute. They're on every single podcast. So, that just shows how mainstream we are. Everyone thinks we're woke.
There's a lot of people with shorn scrotums doing podcasts.
Yeah, well, I think it's just... I'm guessing, it's an American company. I'm guessing what they've seen is the lockdowns lifted. People are going to start going back into general circulation, and people want to be presentable. I'm rocking. I'm not sure. I'm rocking a nice new denim shirt tonight.
I did notice that, Cammy. Actually,
I thought I'd dress up. I'm trying to make an effort.
Designer stubble there as well, mate. Yeah.
I've put the jogging bottoms have gone back in the drawer. I'm trying to make myself more presentable in public.
I actually just bought more jogging bottoms. That's what I was just thinking. A man can never have too many joggers.
I think I've still got a pair of joggies from when I worked in Sports Direct when I was like 19.
Oh,
that's
nice.
the only pair of joggies I've got.
You're so hipster though, Ian. Like, you can't get away with joggies.
I'm wearing shorts at the moment.
Are you? Oh, shorts are pretty hipster.
Are they?
Oh, aye.
Although I'm worried though, because the Adidas bit started cracking on them. These are my Andy Murray Adidas shorts.
Ah, nice.
I've had them for quite a while now. My brother got me them for Christmas. And then he's like, do you recognise the outfit? Because he got me a top as well. I was like, no, he's like, that's what Andy Murray was wearing at the Australian Open final.
That's you. Hit the tennis courts immediately.
All the gear, no idea.
Yeah, so if you want to make sure that there's nothing that peaks up above your shorts or below your shorts unnecessarily when you're out and about this summer, then go to manscaped.com, invest in some male grooming products. We've got a bit to crack through tonight. It's mostly news, to be said, because there hasn't really been any rugby to speak of. There is a new documentary that is going to be made called The Great Game. I've got that right, I wanted to call it The Greatest Game, but I think that's an American film. It's called The Great Game.
The Great Game, yes.
Because we are now on the 150th anniversary of the very first Rugby International. So the documentary is going to be presented by Richard Bath. There's crowdfunding for it now. Ian caught up with Richard and the director, Marcus, on Monday to have a chat about that. So you'll hear the interview, and at the end, Ian gives details of the links, and we'll put those on the podcast as well. So we'll just crack on with this.
Folks, I'm joined now by rugby journalist and author Richard Bath and also film director Magnus Wake. They've joined us here today so we can discuss a documentary they've working on called The Great Game, which looks at the historic match between England and Scotland played 150 years ago at Raeburn Place. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us.
Lovely to be here.
Thank you.
Cool. So I'll just start with you, Richards, if you don't mind. So is this something that you've had in the pipeline for a while, or what was it that specifically motivated you to get this film on the go?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a rugby history nerd. So I've written a whole load of books about rugby history, and my kids, actually, both my boys played rugby at Raeburn Place. So I've always been really aware of the history of the place. And as with all great ideas, it came about in the pub. We're sitting with Magnus, whose house looks over the Raeburn Place, and he said, "Oh, what about doing a documentary?" And I think I'd had about 3 pints too many, and I went, "Yeah, what a good idea." So and here we are.
Okay, so Magnus, so you've probably got the most IMDb credits of anyone we've had on the show.
Some of them dodgy as much as anything else.
Well, that was on a different website. I saw those ones. So the last thing you did was a sort of paranormal psychological thriller called Dark Sense. Have you done a lot of documentary in your time, or what was it that sort of got you involved?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a fair amount of documentary in my time. I did a series which was all about kind of ghosts and ghouls of Scotland, and that was a 6-part series for STV. And the first documentary I did was about Mary Millington, which Richard will probably recognise the name of, who was a 70s porn star. And that was my first documentary I worked on, but I worked on as editor and worked with the director on that, and that was for Channel 4. I don't know, nearly 20 years ago now. But so I've always done documentary. Dark Sense was very much a drama, a thriller, and that was my first feature film directing. We've got more in the pipeline now for that as well. But I think what binds all those different aspects together is having a good story. And I think what stood out to me with the 1871 game, and I came from a place I moved into a house that overlooks the ground, and you're always kind of skirting around looking for good ideas of good stories. And it was just started chatting to Richard in that pub, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, when you're actually look at that game, it had some incredible characters on it, and I'm sure Richard will go into a few of them. People that then went on to play cricket and football, and we're really at the forefront of all the early kind of sporting engagements in that sort of sense of when international sport, I mean, there was various international things previously, but it was the moment where international sport really got going and got rocketing was after the 1871 game, and a lot of the people that played in those games actually played in cricket as well, so it's not, I suppose, just about a game of rugby. It's much more about the characters involved, and I think that's what leapt out to me anyway.
So when you're looking back at a historical event like this, which is, a bit of a while ago, probably before the sort of, the Lumiere brothers and George Méliès had popularised cinema. So how difficult is it to find sort of archive material and resources when you're going back this far?
There's plenty of written evidence that exists, and there's lots of newspaper accounts of the game. And actually, as part of the crowdfunding, we've become aware of like diaries from the actual players themselves, and that's something that we're going to be picking up on. And it was stuff that we weren't really aware of. And part of the idea that we've done the crowdfunding campaign was also to try and kind of raise its profile and find out who's out there that might have extra stuff. Because as you say, there aren't any films of the game or anything like that. There's the two team kind of photographs and a relatively recent print that's surfaced, which shows the game itself. So, I mean, now that we're looking at it, we're going, right, well, we're going to do a whole load of drama recreations as part of it. So we'll be recreating the match. And, there's lots of things about the match itself with the rules where there was hacking. And I don't think even now I've got straight in my head what hacking is, but basically it appears to be literally kicking other players, mostly when they're standing, but probably quite a lot when they're down as well. It was quite a rough game. So we're going to be doing a kind of match recreations of that. But anybody that's got anything from that period, it's fascinating to see it because, the game's changed a huge amount in that time. So I think that's all going to be quite interesting to discover. And that's kind of what the film is. It's a bit of a journey for Richard. He's going to be the kind of the center of it. And we're kind of going to be seeing the story develop through his eyes as he finds out more about what that game of rugby was and what it meant.
Okay, so Richard, who were your sort of main sources of information when you were collating all this together?
There's a ton of stuff. I mean, there's a guy called Arthur Guillemard who played in the game who wrote screeds. In fact, there are a whole bunch of guys who played wrote extensively about the match itself. And there's obviously there's all the newspaper accounts of the time. But there's an incredible wealth of stuff out there. And actually, a lot of the guys who played went on to do extraordinary things. This wasn't like their one moment in the sun. They went on to do incredible other stuff, and so there's a lot of other memorabilia, accounts, diaries, a lot of stuff just hanging around out there. And it's amazing how often you sort of come across stuff. For instance, I was playing golf with a guy who is a church elder up in Fife, and we were just chatting away. He said, "What are you up to?" And so I told him, and he said, one of the guys who played in the 1871 match left my church his Bible, and it's got quite a lot of inscriptions inside about what he did and how he played, and so it's just these incredible moments of that you come across where you start looking for stuff and it just starts coming out of the woodwork, and a number of stories as well. I mean, that are out there. I mean, so for instance, I mean, the guy Burns, who put together the England side, he was actually from St Andrews, went to Edinburgh Academy, and then went down south and was playing at Blackheath. He was actually the guy who was virtually responsible for the Calcutta Cup. He was secretary of Calcutta Rugby Club when they wound up, and it was his idea to come up with to use the reserves for the Calcutta Cup. So, and a load of these guys went on to do other things. And it's just all those sort of really, really interesting stories. I mean, these were guys who they sort of fashioned the world that we live in now. I mean, in fact, Magnus and I were talking about it earlier on about some of the stuff that led directly on from this game. So you got 1871, the first match, but within sort of 15 years, you've got Sevens starting. but those borders clubs wouldn't have been there without the 1871 game, because you had this explosion of interest. And it's just really interesting. And obviously in 1870, after the 1871 game, soccer started up in the same sort of format. So there's just a ton of stuff, and some of the guys are incredibly interesting. We've all got our favourites. One of my favourites is a guy called Henry Clayton, who was he was a 70. The average weight for the guys who played was just over 12 stone, and he was 17.5 stone forward. And he used to go out. He used to run for 5 miles every morning with his Newfoundland dog, and then ride to work in Liverpool on his horse. And then he'd come back right back home, do a 12-hour day, right back home, and he would live off his preparation for the first international in terms of food was strong beer and raw meat. That's what he lived off. He didn't do very well in the game because he'd had a really bad diet. So you'll get these guys, and he was really interesting. There was a guy called Bulldog Irvin as well. He was only 17 at the time and went on to become Scotland's first ever sort of sporting superstar, really. And played against England 10 years in a row. And these are guys that people very little is known about. But actually, his best mate was Robert Louis Stevenson, and we just did such interesting stuff. There are various other guys who just fascinate me. There's obviously a 16-year-old who's supposed to play in the game and got bitten by a dog 2 days before and couldn't play. Went on to captain Scotland at Leslie Balfour Melville. He went on to captain Scotland at cricket when they beat the Aussies a couple of years later. And he played in he won the Amateur Open. He came second in the actual Open at golf. These were guys who were sort of sporting colossuses, and and there's just reading their diaries. Yeah, go on.
There's also some of the other people that are slightly unexpected, like the chap from the Cocoa Islands, who was basically the first man of colour to play in an international sporting game. The first match. And that's kind of unexpected. You don't expect that at the first international to have Alfred Clooney's Ross basically playing in that game. So there's some unexpected stories there. And I think one of the things that helps it kind of leap forward is, for example, J.K. Rowling wrote a short story for her Pottermore series, which features the 1871 game featuring a wizard, I think, that was basically a failed wizard and had left Hogwarts. So you've kind of got these stories which have now morphed out of the 1871 game, and it's obviously quite important to more people than you'd realise as well. And I think that's why these things can come to life, because some of the people that we're going to have talking about the actual game itself will connect the 1871 game to much more of a present day context as well, whether it's through somebody like Alfred Clooney's Ross or JK. Sorry, Richard, I cut right across you there, didn't I?
That's right, on you go.
I spend my life just cutting across Richard, and he's going, oh, shut up.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Alfred Clooney's Ross is a great example. I remember when Joe Ansborough made his debut for Scotland, and there was a big, what was that, 15 years ago, it's a big to-do about, the first man of colour to play for Scotland. And I was going, but hold on, there was another guy. And when you go back to those days and you start reading the accounts and you start talking to historians, you realise actually that the Alfred Clooney's Ross had a brother who also played at a high level of sport, and these guys were welcomed in. It's a really, really interesting sort of view into a society where that had probably very different values to the ones we would normally ascribe to them now. You've got to remember that when people played sport at this time, they were all really middle class, they had a bit of money. This wasn't a big cross section of society, and these were so. It's a really, really interesting time, and it's a time that's sort of given us. We were just saying, the Six Nations started, or the Five Nations as it was then, started soon after, or the Home International, and then onto the, within 20 years onto the 30 years onto the Five Nations, and that's a format we've effectively still got now.
That's quite interesting. I think as well, was there not Scotland's first football captain? Was he not a black Afro-Caribbean guy? Albert Watson, I think his name was, something like that.
Yeah, and Andrew Watson.
Andrew
He was
Watson,
Scotland's first. He was Scotland's first black footballer, but that was quite soon after. Wasn't long after at all. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's speak of the game itself. But we'll not give too much away because we want people to watch the documentary as well. But Magnus has already mentioned hacking, and I believe there's another couple of little idiosyncrasies, shall we call them, such as is it true that there was no penalties in the match because a gentleman wouldn't cheat? Is that the?
Yeah. Yeah, mind you, they say a gentleman wouldn't cheat, but the English arrived and they came on a train overnight and they were absolutely knackered. So I had a couple of hours of kip in the morning, and then they got to Raeburn Place, and all the pitches in England were very wide, and they had very good backs, and they got to Raeburn Place, which had been laid out very, very narrowly, and because the Scots had really good forwards, and they were just absolutely outraged. And then so first of all, they had an argument about that. Then they had an argument about the laws, which went on for ages. And then there was a great moment in the game. The winning try was scored by a guy called Angus Buchanan, and the English guys didn't think that the ball had been touched down, and were very vociferous in their complaining. And the umpire, as he was then called, was a guy called Healy Hutchison Almond, who was headmaster of I think Loretto School, and he treated all players like schoolboys, and he said he gave he awarded the try on the basis that he always awarded the try to the team against the team that complained the most, because that meant they were probably in the wrong. and all of the above helped sort of, that really fed into that, right, helped spark that rivalry. So nothing much has changed.
Yeah, 150 years later, we're still complaining about referees, even with TMOs and all that. So I was actually going to ask, what manner was the game played in? Because obviously I'm a Glasgow boy, so there's a couple of football teams here that aren't too keen on each other. The first few times they played, apparently it was very sort of friendly.
Yeah, well, I mean, actually, that was it. I mean, I think because it was just a curiosity, because nobody had ever had matches like this before. It was actually played on a Monday, and so a lot of people were at work. So again, it was a very sort of hey, and it's Edinburgh. Lots of people, lots of genteel clapping. Not much sort of. Certainly wasn't anything like an Old Firm game. And yeah, and it was. There was a lot of appreciation of good play from both sides, and it was sort of played in the sort of spirit of the time, I suppose, of Victorian England, Victorian Britain, and the off the pitch, everybody was incredibly genteel. On it, it was pretty full-blooded. I mean, there were several players who never played again. One in particular, who got hit so hard that he went off, and that was it. He just wasn't ever able to play again.
But was the game? This is where I asked Richard a question as well. But was the game more? Was it more of a cross with football at the time, with kicking the ball up the pitch? More like, because what I thought that was one of the things with hacking was people would hack the ball up the pitch.
Yeah, well, it was at a time when the rules were in flux. I mean, you're not long past the point at which football and rugby had sort of parted ways, and they hadn't really parted ways that much. I mean, the only reason they played rugby rather than football was because effectively there were no football clubs. There was Queen's Park in Scotland, and that was it. And actually, that was the sort of background to the whole game, because in 1870 they played a game of football between Scotland and England, but it wasn't Scotland. It was a bunch of guys from London, where representing Scotland. Some of whom were Scots, some of whom weren't, and there was such outrage that Scotland should be represented at football, a game that wasn't really played in Scotland, that they insisted on having a rugby game. And that's what happened.
And that's what led to the match.
Exactly. Lots of angry people in the pub.
Again, but a lot has changed.
Exactly.
What were the other sort of main rule changes, rule differences? Because we actually we did a quiz a wee while ago, and I got the score right because I said it was 1-0, because the try gave you a shot at goal. But then I've seen other people say it was like 2 goals and 1 try for Scotland. What was the official score? And also, by the way, for anyone listening, sort of spoiler alert: Scotland won.
Yeah, I don't think there's people can Google it too easily. There's no spoiler there. Yeah.
Yeah, so
well, that's right. It was a try for
Titanic.
goal,
Everybody knows what happens at the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, they didn't have points in the same way, and effectively tries didn't count unless they were converted. So there were 3 tries in the game, and only one of them was converted, and so that's what won it. Yeah,
because it was the try get you a try at goal. That was the
exactly
etymology.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's where it comes from. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yep. So
and it sounds like it was a dodgy try as well.
It's like Duhans against France, the first one. So where will the documentary be available for viewing, and when do you expect to have it out?
So basically, our current kind of timeline places us getting the whole thing finished at about the end of August. Obviously, with various restrictions, we're still looking at when we're going to be able to actually start doing some of the interviews. So it's still a little bit grey, but basically, with everything opening up as it's looking to do, we're looking at a timeline of roughly the end of August when we'll actually have some screenings around Edinburgh. At the end of August, and then the intention is to get it online so that people can see it via streaming services after that. So you're looking at kind of later part of the year, beginning of next year for streaming services, to be announced. But one of the other aspects of it, just to pick up, is the fact the Museum of International Rugby, which is going to be built at Raeburn Place as well. So it's part of a new development which is going to be there, and the documentary will be a feature of that new museum. Because at the moment there really isn't that sort of home in Scotland for rugby in terms of a proper museum. So it's a really nice thing to. It would have been so nice to have had a reconstruction and a proper match and all the rest of it on the actual day of, the 150th anniversary. As it was, what we managed to do was it was quite nice. We had kind of the Ackies minis, who are just the youth teams training on the day, as well as Gregor Townsend and Mike Blair came down, hot-footing it off the plane from France, and they came down and gave of their time to support the documentary as well, which is fantastic. And in a sense, that's kind of what we're doing with the documentary, is we're trying to make sure there's a good bit of light shone on this, because it's a story that most people don't know. It happened 150 years ago. It doesn't feel that relevant, but actually a lot in the stories is relevant, and a lot of where we are today comes from there very directly. And so we've raised a lot of money. It's basically a feature-length documentary that we're giving it a full broadcast budget, and we've already raised and got sponsorship for the documentary, which has been fantastic. But we're doing the last bit is crowdfunding. In part, the reason for that is to give rugby fans a chance to actually get involved with it as well, and that's what we're keen to do, get people to come along and support it via the crowdfunding. Yeah,
I've seen if you pay 50 quid, you get your name in the credits.
Absolutely. And nobody's going to make this film for another 50 years. So,
there's your name in history right there. Yeah,
exactly. And your name permanently attached to it. No, well, I mean, that's it. I mean, we were talking about it. If we can get the same number of people that sits in a wee section of Murrayfield to chuck in some money, then we're there. And it's just, but people do have different priorities, and we completely recognise that, especially at the moment. But anybody that can support it, be fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, we had a lot of friends, people we knew, and as people found out we were doing this, people wanted to get involved, and this has given them a chance to do so. I mean, one of the reasons for doing it, as I said, I coached both my sons at Raeburn Place, so they were in the Bats, which is Broughton, Ackies, and Trinity. But it's basically a community club for the whole of Stockbridge and the whole of that part of Edinburgh. And It's transformed what was a rather sad place with porta cabins and look really down at heel into the transformation of it is remarkable. We've got this incredible stand. They're going to be all-weather pitches. It's going to be a museum, and the difference is already startling. I mean, it's a real pity that nobody's been able to see it because of COVID. But if you walk up in Inverleith Park, for instance, you can see this amazing stand, and by the time it's finished and by the time the all-weather pitches are in it, it'll be an incredible community asset for the whole of Edinburgh.
Yeah, totally agree. And I should just give a shout out to our big supporters, where we've had money come in from GPS, Macpherson Charitable Trust, and the Gordon Brown Memorial Fund, as well as Famous Grouse and Bruin Dolphin have all stepped up and are sponsoring it as well. So we're very much appreciative to them for supporting this.
Great. So how many people have been working on the project? Has it mainly been yourselves, or have you had any honours, as we say?
Well, the board of Raeburn Place Foundation as well, of Alistair Graham and Ralph Lutton in particular, Stuart Bailey. So a whole bunch of guys, and we've had some help from Graham Law at the SIU as well. Who very kindly brought down Gregor and Mike and the Calcutta Cup on the 150th anniversary. But it's basic Magnus and I sitting over a couple of beers talking about what we do.
There's a bit more organisation in it than that. I've got a production company and we've got people working on it in the background. But basically, once we finish the crowdfunding, we're set to go, and we will be lining up all the interviews. But it's only now that you can see the rest of the UK starting to unlock, that you can actually start to get an appreciation that now we will be actually able to go and meet people properly. Because what we didn't want this to be was just a collection of Zoom calls. There's much more to it than that. And I think seeing the places and the people, and we've got some ideas which bring it to life and make it a bit more fun in terms of like a ball of the time being kicked and punted and stuff like that by players and things like that. So it should be a good fun trip down history lane, but bringing it all to life nicely.
So how many interviews do you have lined up? And I take it it'll be, well, obviously not the players, unless they're immortals, but family members from, say, north and south of the border, or are you sort of mainly focusing on the Scottish side?
Yeah, there's the majority of the interviews will be with people in Scotland, but we don't want to talk about exactly who we've got in the in the documentary, because it wouldn't be fair on the people yet. But we've got a whole load of quite big names lined up, and I think people will really enjoy it.
We're certainly kind of present day players, but also players from both sides of the border getting involved with it. And also trying to reach outside that as well to people that just are fans of rugby as well. And yeah, we're in touch with a number of family members of some of the original players as well. And we're hoping to make sure that they get a feature as well within the documentary.
Yeah, no, I think you'll find a pretty big market for it. For example, you look at the success of Oceans Apart, the film that Dan Leo's done. So yeah, I think you're onto a winner there, gentlemen.
Yeah.
So I mean, have you got anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Not really. I mean, I would just encourage anybody to check out the crowdfunding website, have a look at it, see if you want to get your name in the credits, or else come along to one of the premiere screenings as well. But going further than that, please do keep an eye out for it for when it actually comes out properly, and enjoy hearing about the story of these great people that kind of set it all in motion for us. I mean, for me, I remember as a kid going along to watch Scotland play at Murrayfield, and it didn't matter how much we were losing by. Even in the last 5 minutes, Scotland got the ball and were charging up the field. The place, yeah, you know what it's like at a rugby game. It's such a passionate, emotive moment, and it's easy in lockdown to forget about that. But it was this game that kick-started all of that, and it'd be fantastic to celebrate it.
Excellent. Richard, anything else from you?
No, that's what I'd say. I mean, the one thing I would say is if you've got anything that you think might be of interest, any old diaries, any caps. We recently came across an old law book, which we think is one of the oldest ones out there. Anything like that you think might be of interest, just give us a shout. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, we'll put the links for the film onto the podcast page once we share it. But for those of you listening, it's thegreatrugbygame.com if you want to go and crowdsource it. And also Twitter is @thegreatgamedoc. Is that right?
Yes, at the Great Game Doc. Yeah.
Yep. So you can keep abreast with the updates there. But for now, Magnus and Richard, thank you very much, and best of luck for the rest of the film.
Thank you
Cheers.
very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
So that was interesting. I'm quite looking forward to see that documentary when it comes out eventually.
Yeah, I mean, like we're saying, it's something that we don't know a lot about because there isn't footage and what have you, and it's quite a while ago. And it's recognised as basically the first international sporting event of all time, and not just the first ever international rugby match. So obviously, it's massively important to not just rugby but sport in general.
No, I didn't realise it was the first one. The kind of, like you said, the first proper kind of cross-border international match. That'd be, definitely something worth covering. So yeah, go visit the links and you can find out how to support the film as well. I mean, personally, I think given us the 150th anniversary, we should have just held the Calcutta Cup under those rules, or as close as they could have done. Bring back. Actually, that's the new bring back rocking. Bring back hacking.
I was thinking that. Bring back hacking.
12 and average weights being 12 stone 3.
Well, there's something to be said for that. I think we've discussed it on another podcast at this weekend, Scotland women play Italy in what is the final round of the pool element of this year's Six Nations. So essentially, Italy and Scotland are battling out to find out who's going to finish second in the pool because Italy were roundly beaten by England at the weekend. It was 67-3. And whoever comes second is going to then play the second place in Pool B, which is France, Ireland, and Wales. I think it seems most likely it's probably going to be Ireland by the looks of things. Depending on if Ireland haven't played France yet, have they? Is that this weekend?
No, they had their rest week was the first week, so
it's Ireland France this weekend. 2:15. So Scotland are playing Italy at 5:00 now. We have, if you listen to the audio pod version of the podcast, you're going to now hear from Emma Wassell. But unfortunately, we are broadcasting this prior to the prior to when we're allowed to release it. So I'm going to stick it in the audio podcast, and you can hear that now.
All the more reason for people to revisit the joys of tonight's podcast.
Exactly.
And listen to it in audio form. It's like buying a game in multiple platforms.
Yeah. But the games this weekend, it's at Scotstoun. It's a home game for Scotland, albeit there's going to be no fans there. But it's probably going to be a bit closer, Ian, because I mean it's the scoreline against. I mean, Italy kind of got beaten by a high margin by England, and England beat Scotland. But essentially, Italy and the Italy and Scottish setups are broadly similar, I think.
Yeah, I think we've, as you'll hear, and I'm sure I'm not breaking any embargoes saying this, but Italy have won the last 3 times that we've played them. But the last one was in an absolute squall in Padova. And then it was 19-0 at half time. It finished 26-12, and I think the year before that we'd been beaten 26-7. But Italy scored 2 tries right at the death, which put a fair bit of gloss on it. And as well as that, I think they predate Philip Doyle coming in. It was the first ever full-time Scotland head coach for the women's team. So it is. I mean, obviously, it's not a fully professional setup for the women, but there are players who are playing professional, and obviously, what with the SRU have, as we discussed at the Six Nations Clubs last year, Rachel Malcolm was very clear about it. She said the SRU are funding the women's game quite well now. Obviously, it's going to take a bit of a dent, what with the COVID nonsense. But yeah, I think this will be a lot closer. Like you said, with the England game, I thought particularly the set piece looked a lot better. And there are some very good players. Unfortunately, there was also a press conference with Ross Miller, one of the assistant coaches. He has said that Rachel Malcolm is out for the rest of the tournament.
I mean, she played with someone. She injured her knee in the first couple of minutes and then played for the rest of the half.
Basically, straight from kickoff, she's hurt herself, and then I think at one point she's tried to drag down Poppy Cleo, who is quite an unstoppable player. So yeah, just shows the measure of Dr. Malcolm, that she's prepared to put herself on the line like that for the team. But hopefully we'll get a game, and it's a all-weather surface, which the Italians might not be used to. Whereas it's the Scotland women's home now, so slight advantages there.
Is this one on the big telly as well, or we haven't?
It's not. I mean, we'll jump straight to the hands in the ruck. We had a hands in the ruck from somebody about this. More of a question than anything else. It was Eleanor Stanley said it's rehashing the hands in the ruck from last week, but BBC Scotland have nothing scheduled on Saturday at 5 p.m. Not even a repeat of Flog a Pointless Bargain Escape to the Country or River City. No idea if folk contacting BBC Scotland could persuade them to show the women's game, but it's worth a try. I've had a look. It's Chelsea are playing in the the Milk Cup. Do they still do the Milk Cup?
The Rumbelows Cup.
This cup. I don't know. They're playing in a cup. There's football. There's English football on BBC One Scotland on Saturday. Which given you can, on iPlayer now you can actually choose your region.
Yep.
So it's not it's not hard to think that if you stuck the Scotland women versus Italy this weekend on at the same time as the Chelsea game on BBC One Scotland, that somebody wouldn't have the wherewithal to kind of, if they really wanted to watch the Chelsea game, just change the region settings and watch it.
It's a real missed opportunity yet again, isn't it? And again, really, it bugs me quite a lot because people. Do you remember when Premier Sports, who shall not be named, picked up the Pro 12, Pro 14 contract, and people were saying, why weren't the BBC bidding for this? Why weren't why are the games no longer on Alba and things like that? And it's like look at the absolute disdain they show for the women's game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what it is. Like, let's not sugarcoat it. It's just utter disdain they're showing, and it's really disappointing.
It doesn't really make any sense either because, Iain, you've been at the press conferences and there's, the kind of big names from Scottish rugby reporting are all there. It's the press conferences are getting busier than they have been. And it's making, it's back page of a couple of papers, some of the interviews from this week and last week.
But like John said, it just comes across as disdain now. You're getting... like we've said before, it's allegedly the fastest growing, or it was the fastest growing participant sport in the world, and there's not a lot of other options. There's a Twitter, there's a petition you can sign on Change by Claire Wood-Mancy, which wants the BBC to show it, and it's not just the fact that it's on the iPlayer. I found it very difficult to find it on the iPlayer. So I'm not sure if I mentioned that. I logged in early and it wasn't there, and it wasn't like it said coming up, or if you go to the sports section. It's not
you had to wait till the point
had to wait till the actual it started, and I missed the first 10 minutes of chat. And it was only when I went to the BBC Sport website, and then you could watch it off of there. That's when I realised it was now on air. So then you had to piss about with the Fire Stick and stick it on that.
It's funny to be in a situation where the BBC are behind the times in terms of fast-growing sports, isn't it? Can you imagine?
They stuck was it Saturday night? BBC 4 was England women's football was on BBC 4, but they, as a mark of respect, they put it on the iPlayer. Which, it's not like the game was cancelled or anything. It's just we're going to broadcast. We're going to put this on the internet instead of put it on BBC 4, which is an arts channel, as a mark of respect. It's what DMX would have wanted.
He wants his liver best lives. Party up. X would have brought it to you.
X would have brought it to you. Yeah, he'd have brought that game to you via BBC One. No bother at all.
Yeah. So we'll try. I'll try and find the change petition. I'll stick it on the podcast post on the blog. So you got scottishrugbyblog.co.uk, and you find the most recent podcast post. We'll put the link to the survey on there, as well as the link to the Great Game documentary as well.
I did sign it, but I was a wee bit upset because I didn't have my location on, and it tried to default my location to EH11. So you try to say I live in Edinburgh, eh?
I had to put my employer postcode into something recently, and because I'm registered through the Edinburgh office of my current employer, I had to put an EH11 postcode in, and it felt dirty. I was really, really upset about this. I was like,
that's why you're all Warriors topped up tonight.
That's what, basically, like, I've been like
compensating.
Yeah, I've been like walking around the house going, "Oh man, Pierre, gotta talk like this all day, man. This is pure good." So, like proper G'ing myself up into Glaswegian again. I had to wash 3 times.
Anyway, to John's now based out of Emirates, slowly watching Morph over the next few weeks. It's like I have to occasionally scroll through our YouTube feed just to check everything's okay, and I can see my lockdown here waving up and down as we watch it because we've recorded these now. We see John slowly merge into kind of a
Ross Ford.
When he starts turning up wearing gillets and red trousers, we know we're in trouble.
Oh, I've got a wee pair over there actually.
Anyway, so that's the Scotland women. If you are wanting to, John, you'll have had your tea. Martin Bell says.
Salt and sauce, is it?
Salt and sauce. I had a chippy tonight actually, and I did not have salt and sauce. So
it's 5 o'clock, and it is on BBC iPlayer if you can find it. Broadcast in black and white is a mark of respect.
For DMX.
I said I wasn't going to make jokes about this. We'll move on.
I know you told us no.
I can make jokes about the BBC. I'm making jokes about the BBC.
What?
Anyway, we'll move on. So that's 5 o'clock BBC iPlayer, and we'll cover it next week on the podcast. The big news today, though, is that Gregor Townsend and Steve Tandy were named as the attack and defence coach, respectively, for the British and Irish Lions, alongside Rob McBride, formerly of Leinster and Wales, Neil Jenkins, or the ghost of Neil Jenkins, as he looks absolutely haunted.
He's
does not look a well man, does he?
He's so old, isn't he?
I was saying to somebody today, I actually started to look like the character he dressed up as in the 1997 Lions 2 documentary when he dressed up as Rupert. And obviously you got Warren Gatland in charge as well. It's weird. There's been lots of jokes about essentially Warren Gatland has gathered together a group of bald men. It's just, utterly amazing just watching the kind of, look at the lineup. And I like the fact that they've stuck in the press photos as well, the line, they've stuck Warren Gatland in the middle. I know he's head coach, but obviously just to give it that balance of 2 bald heads either side of him.
2 eggs, either side.
Oh. Did anyone think Robin McBride looked a bit like Dominic West after he'd been in a fight? Like somebody showed an old picture. So I was like, I think. Now, Townsend, of course, didn't go a few years ago because he just got the Scotland job.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've read Tom English's article on the BBC, but he was saying, when Townsend took that Scotland job, there was a potential for him to be the head coach this time round, but then 2019 was a disaster, really, wasn't it? We had a poor Six Nations and we had a dreadful World Cup, and then we got Steve Tandy and the difference in Scotland's defence is just unreal. I think Kyle Patterson, who I'm sure John knows, I don't know if he listens to the podcast or anything, but he said like the last year of Matt Taylor's reign as defence coach, Scotland had conceded 32 tries, and I think over the last 2 years we've conceded like 12. This has been a massive difference, and he's rightly, I think, going on that plane along with Gregor.
I mean, he's in, I think, because Andy Farrell kind of withdrew late on for reasons unknown, but I think essentially a lot of the coaches withdrew. I don't know if it's because of the the schedule. Some rumours it's to do with the schedule, whatever. But if you want somebody to come in and kind of turn it around overnight, that's exactly what Steve Tandy's done with Scotland, John. It's not been a kind of slow, oh, let's get used to the coach. It was literally kind of, I know we were a bit sceptical after coming off the World Cup, but actually looking back at that first Six Nations, as disappointing as some of the games where the defence improved like straight away in the Ireland game.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and he did. He made a massive impact, and actually, you noticed in that first Six Nations where he was in charge of the defence, the intensity, the difference between the intensity that he'd put into the players and the kind of latter, almost the latter months of the mentioned Matt. It was very different, and you could see the players were working much harder in defence. Whereas we probably had this feeling before that defence was kind of an afterthought. We were swashbuckling Scotland. We were going to throw the ball through our legs and go and score 100 tries a game, and then beat everybody. And yeah, we'll concede 99 tries, but it's fine because we'll score more than them, which isn't international rugby. As much as we would all love it to be, it just isn't international rugby. So Steve Tandy's come in. The team just look a lot more organised, and it just goes to show the benefit of even just simple organisation in defence. It seemed to be lacking before, and you can tell he's a guy who works in that premise of just the small wins, or the easy wins, just spacing between defenders. Like literally, it's as simple as that. He's got better spacing between defenders. He's got better numerical matches. And he's got an organiser in Chris Harris. Whereas Chris Harris, he was in the team before, but there's definitely more responsibility being put on him now to really organise that defence. And, it just works.
Yeah. The other thing, this is someone else's hands in the ruck. We're going to be having no hands in the ruck, by the way, today, because
I'll need to figure out one just now. Then.
Oh, you'll be fine. Don't we'll just we'll not do hands in the ruck this week. We've got complaints about Tunis. This is from Callum White on Twitter. Complaints about Townsend's qualifications for Lions attack coach was his hands in the ruck because Scots have become more balanced, less all-out attack team, thereby ignoring his focus on attacking rugby that clearly worked out against the best teams in the world in the first few years of his Scotland. His time as Scotland boss, and I think there is something in that. I mean, he worked out a lot of the defences of New Zealand. We ran New Zealand close. We had the game against South Africa in 2018. Although I think South Africa had the better of us at the breakdown attack wise, we did tear them open. It was a lot closer game. I think when I had to look back on it just to see how Hamish Watson had performed in that game for a thing to prove that he wasn't lightweight. But I mean, that try opened them up, and those kind of things that was a Townsend attack. That
try over with the Hugh Jones flick.
That pass. That's showboating. That is we appreciate a bit of that. That's a lovely try.
Yeah, but Gatland said today that he's been given the name of 50 players by the coaches, which is and that's got to come down to. I mean, I think the rumor is 36.
Yeah.
So I'll do my quick maths. 14 players to be shorn from there. 36 seems small. I think we've talked about this before. 36 seems small, given that they can't bring any replacements in once they're in South Africa, because you sat in a hotel for 2 weeks before you can join in. So I'd be very surprised if you're going to have, for a start, in the front row with props and hookers, you're going to have to go with 4 of each. I think for the very reason that if you've got 3, you need to have 2 on the bench of each position to fulfill. You need to have 2 in each matchday squad rather to be able to play the game. And you've got 2 then, so 1 drops, then all of a sudden it's squeaky bum time. So I'd be very surprised if it ended up kind of being 36. Seems small, Ian.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think maybe 38 would be slightly more manageable, unless you can take anyone who can comfortably do either side of the scrum. But they're pretty few and far between. So I think we're going to see a lot of the sort of hybrid lock blindside kind of guys, which we might get onto later again. Lightly.
Yeah. Well,
Never mind.
yeah.
But yeah, another thing regarding sort of Townsend, you know what you're saying, people about Townsend not being qualified as an attack coach. Again, this was from the Tom English article I read earlier. Scotland scored 21 tries in the Six Nations. There wasn't a lot of teams who'd scored more tries than that throughout the competition's history. I mean, Wales scored more tries this year, but other than that, I think there was 3 times England had done it when they'd won Grand Slams, and maybe a couple of times, like, you know, Ireland and France had done it. We are starting to get this balance now. You know, like John was saying, you know, it was the swashbuckling Scotland before. Then last year was a lot more pragmatic. Now we're trying to marry that together, and obviously the fact when you've got an absolute monster of an attacker like Duhan van der Merwe, and you bring back one of the best fly halves in the world to your squad, that helps matters.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost going back into from a Lions point of view as well. It's going back. Who are the best coaches isn't necessarily who the most winningest coaches either. I mean, you look at, you know, Jim Telfer and Ian McGeechan, they weren't they're 2 of the greatest Lions coaches we've had. And yet neither of them, when they were kind of coaching Scotland at the time that they were then made Lions coaches, it's not like they were coaching a dominant Scotland side, one that was consistently winning. But they were viewed as very, very good, well thought of coaches doing a job with what little they were given. And that's exactly what you need in a coach of a scratch side.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. And, you know, I think it takes a certain type of coach to be a Lions tourist coach, and I think it's maybe less so now in the modern era. But you know, if you remember back to a review of the '97 documentary and stuff like that, there was it's definitely a unique environment, shall we say, that the boys found themselves in, and. Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting because it's something Warren Gatland was talking about today in some of the interviews that came up about, you know, the fact that he's spoken to coaches about how players have struggled in the bio bubbles and the fact it's going to be difficult going to South Africa and having to be in those circumstances and how they're going to manage that. And I think one thing that's not talked about enough with Townsend is he's actually got a fairly wicked sense of humour. I was watching about there's the video of it's when Stuart Hogg won the player of the tournament in 2017. It might be in 2018. And
16 and 17 he won, so it would have been.
So I think it was the 16. It might have been the 16. I can't remember which one it was, but the SRU had a video of them kind of surprising Stuart Hogg in the camp of the fact that he'd won it. And Gregor Townsend had done a PowerPoint presentation in which he'd included Stuart Hogg's Bebo profile photos.
That's right. Yep, that's right.
So it's not, you know. I think that's, you know, he can't, you know, there's kind of this portrait of Gregor Townsend as this kind of like very straight guy, kind of, you know, very tactical, very, very intelligent coach. But I think underneath all that, there's also, you know, I think people underestimate sometimes, you know, his man management abilities as well. And I think he's obviously learned a lot from the Finn Russell episode because, you know, there's not many coaches could come back from something like that and work with a player again at the level that they have done.
I have to agree with that. It takes a lot. It takes a lot for a coach to do that, and particularly in the type of environment it was in. You know, I think he showed a lot of maturity, which we all, I think it's fair to say, we all criticised maybe some of the management style at the time. But actually it's how you can, you know, people make mistakes. We all know that, right? But it's how you come back from them. It's what you do next that's most important. And I think he's really shown like a incredible amount of maturity to kind of say, do you know what? Yeah, there's going to be stuff that we both disagree about, but let's go on with it. And his man management, you can see that in the players, like particularly this camp, the intensity of the players. They all clearly want to play for Scotland, and you know, ultimately playing for Scotland. We've all been line managed. You know, ultimately they're line managed by Gregor Townsend, so they're playing for their manager. They're playing for that jersey via him, and you just have to look at some of the players that he's brought through and just the way they've committed to being part of the Scottish setup. But even guys like Duhan who've come in and just hit the ground running. That's a testament to Gregor Townsend's management.
I think it's something that's really important. I think Iain, going to somewhere like South Africa with the Lions as well, that you're going to, it's easy. It's relatively easy, although he's done a very good job of it, to forge an identity within a national team, but to forge an identity of a scratch side where you've got from 4 different countries, 5 of you include Northern Ireland as well as Southern. It's not an easy task, and that's I think he's been in that environment himself, I suppose, as a Lions tourist, and also that kind of some of the work he'll have done with Scotland and building a team is going to come in useful as well.
Well, I mean, you can tell by his sort of character, he's not going to excuse me, he's not a sort of blood and thunder type. But as if anyone who's read his autobiography knows, I was going to say blood and thunder types examples: Sir Alex Ferguson, Jim Telfer. But we know if you've read his autobiography, Jim Telfer did give him a bit of a sort of arm around the shoulder looks on, this is how we're going to go about this. And that just shows good emotion intelligence. And I think that's something that Townsend clearly has. And obviously, he's played in South Africa, France, Australia, England, Scotland. He's a very inquisitive. I was going to say he's a curious chap, but it could come across either way. He's a very inquisitive gentleman, and he's one of these people who likes to meet people and learn things. And I think that the fact that he's not a bullish sort. He's not going to go into I can't imagine him going into where was he playing in France? Was it Perpignan?
Mm-hmm.
Perpignan.
Yeah. He's not going to go in there and start acting the prima donna and say, "Look, this is my team now," sort of thing. He's a very considered gentleman, and I think it'll be a massive boon to the Lions players he's picking. And also, like John was saying there, the whole thing with Finn Russell, there was some, I wouldn't say spiteful, but I mean there was barbs thrown. There were shots fired by both sides there, but they've put that behind them because ultimately they want the best for Scotland and they want to be the best at their jobs. And I think a good. Let's be honest. I think this is an audition. I think for Gregor Townsend to get the Lions job in 4 years' time. I reckon that's what this is.
I think it's a really important point you make, Iain, that they want the best for Scotland and they want to be the best at their jobs. I think people forget that ultimately these guys are in employment. They're in a performance business, but ultimately they've got jobs. Finn Russell's next contract is determinant on yes, how well he plays at Racing, but also, the biggest international stage, playing well in the Six Nations, playing well at World Cups, that playing well for the Lions, that all adds value to his contract. So wherever he's negotiating a contract next, please be Glasgow, please be Glasgow, please be Glasgow. It just adds value to that contract. And the same goes for Gregor Townsend. Anyone who thinks Gregor Townsend is going to be Scotland coach for the next 10 years hasn't followed Gregor Townsend, because as Iain says, he moves around, he is inquisitive, he wants to learn. So he's not going to stay Scotland coach forever, but his next move is determined by how well he does at, yes, being Scotland coach, but also how well he does at the Lions, how well he puts himself across, and how well his message is received. And, him and Finn Russell have kind of agreed to somewhat extent that it's beneficial for both their careers to be getting along.
There's an interesting point here from Martin Bell, but picks up on something you've said, John, is that one of Townsend's strengths is he's always learning. Man management is a good example. Working with, love them or loathe them, the most successful Lions head coach in history will help him kick on again. I think you look at the length of time that Warren Gatland was with Wales, and we're saying that Gregor Townsend is not going to be Scotland coach forever, but there's nothing to say that he won't have a good, if he can learn from Warren Gatland, and if he can have a constantly evolving. That's the challenge, isn't it? To have a constantly evolving team at international level, and throw in there the prospect of doing the Lions every 4 years. Warren Gatland's done it for 3 tours now. There's nothing to stop Gregor Townsend doing that from the next tour onwards if if he's successful.
Well, that's ultimately it, isn't it? In a nutshell, if he's successful, and we all need to remind ourselves that the Tuesday clock was ticking not that long ago.
The other thing that's, I mean, I got slightly excited. Allowed myself to get slightly excited about this Lions tour after the disappointment of the last 5 Lions tours. But it does feel exciting because we've got Scottish representation on the coaching staff, so they're the 50-50 calls or even the 60-40 calls. If you've got 60-40 calls and Gregor Townsend or Steve Tandy wants someone and they believe they could work with and do a job, they can pull stats out of their back pocket that wouldn't be available to the other coaches or from other nations who aren't represented there. So I think that goes in their favour. The other side of that, though, which someone pointed out to me on Twitter today, is there is also an element of you've got the job as Lions coach and you want to do a good job. So there might be a ruthlessness about that you have to pick the best side, and that might mean dropping your favourite players. It might mean not showing any favouritism. So whilst I have some hope that a couple of those 50-50 calls might start to go our ways, I'm also conscious of the fact that Gregor Townsend and Steve Tandy will want to come in and show that they can do a good job, and they're not going to owe anybody any favours, Iain.
Well, the thing is, right, like you said, and like we've been saying, it's all about results. So I don't think Townsend would be so vain as to say, no, I want this. I mean, but at the end of the day, though, right, it's Warren Gatlin's shout. Steve Tandy and Gregor Townsend could stand there and stomp their feet and what have you and say, no, pick Chris Harris immediately. But Warren Gatlin go, nah, I'm going to pick JD2 again. So that's a kind of get out for him, is that if it's get out, it's just more of a, well, I can put the case forward, but I don't get the final box ticking. But this thing, I think it's actually really good news for Finn Russell, to be honest, because people will go, oh, but he's a wild maverick renegade. But to me, well, actually, no, there's been a couple of times where I've just said, look, could you do this and this? And he'll do it. And Russell's kicking game is excellent. His long kicking game is from hand is very good. Obviously, did we end up with Dan Bigger on our team list?
We did end up in the 15. We ended up with Dan Bigger. I think if you're looking at your fly halves options, though, there's 2 things you do as a Lions. There's 2 things that Lions coaches in the past have done. Is one is you look at who's the best now, but you also have to look at who's going on tour next time, and who's going to be available next time. Now, Johnny Sexton's not going to be available next time, and a lot of people have put Johnny Sexton in the Lions squads, but Johnny Sexton is not going on this Lions tour. It's going to be Bigger and Russell are going. I think Farrell will go. I mean, Gatlin today was talking about Saracens players having, credit in the bank and, and all that. So I think some of the, I think you'll see Farrell going, but I don't see Russell not going, especially now that Townsend's in charge. Like you said, he'll be able to put in the word and say, this is what this guy does behind the scenes. This is you see the wild maverick on the pitch, but actually behind the scenes he's involved in the attack planning. He's involved in all of this stuff. I think it probably means Chris Harris is probably nailed on certain as well.
So do you want to do the top 5? So I'm actually on a betting site right now. I'm not going to say which one.
Okay.
Chris Harris's odds have come down significantly for going on tour. By the way, like I really wish I'd taken it at, what was it, 91? You had?
I've got it at 10. I've got 10 to 1.
10 to 1. So it's 94 now. But do you want to do the top 5 absolute certainties that this betting site has going on tour
for Scotland?
In the backs,
in the backs for all nations.
All nations in the backs, top 5. So I'll give you some clues. There's one. There's at least one from each. So Farrell's top. Yeah, 1 to 20 on. Farrell will be going on tour.
Yeah.
Henshaw, yes, 1 to 10.
George North.
Oh, see, George North is slightly down, but he's in the top 10.
Because Farrell's got shorter odds than Henshaw.
Farrell's got shorter odds than Henshaw.
Because the bookies are trying not to make a loss, so the bookies will know that lots of English fans are going to put money on Farrell. So it's not necessarily based on
Yep.
whether or not that's like that.
So we've got obvious one.
Alan Wynne Jones.
I'm talking backs.
Backs. Oh, sorry.
Hoggy, of course.
Hoggy.
Yeah. Hoggy goes at 1 to 20, so he's the same as Farrell.
There is a worrying number of people who
Lewis
are not
Rees-Zammit. Lewis Rees-Zammit.
No, he is.
I thought he might be...
Lewis Rees-Zammit. Bloody hell. He is 1 to 2 to go.
See, I just thought loads of people might put money on him. That's all.
And
It's the same as Gary Ringrose and Liam Williams. Sorry,
Anthony Watson.
So he's 6th in the list.
Swine.
So the other two we've got your two wingers. You've got Johnny May at 1 to 10,
No,
and you've got Josh Adams at 1 to 10.
no, I'd put Watson well ahead of May because Watson can play at fullback as well.
Watson's versatile. Yeah, I know. I'm surprised at that.
I mean, Johnny May can only play left wing.
Yep. So Finn Russell is 4 to 6 to go, which is behind Dan Biggar and Johnny Sexton, but at least ahead of George Ford. And as I said, we've got, who else have we got here? Chris Harris, 94. Ali Price, 5 to 2 to go.
I was going to ask, who's the shortest odd scrum half? Because that's
Connor Murray, 1 to 5, followed by.
I was just thinking this today. Gregor Townsend has to work with Connor Murray now. He has to work with his standing leg.
I bet that Gregor's trying to get Josh Strauss into camp.
And I also say, right, Connor Murray and Stuart Hogg are not rooming together. That's
100%. So yeah, Doohan's pretty high up there. Ali Price is high up there. We've also got Darcy and Hugh Jones mentioned, and Sean Maitland and Sam Johnson.
What were Hamish Watson's odds? Lightweight.
Let's go. Hamish Watson, the lightweight that he is behind the following. So you've got Mauro Itoje at 1 to 10, Furlong at 10, James Ryan, Ken Owens, Kyla Sinclair, Alan Jones, Talupi Falatau, and then Hamish Watson at 1 to 4, alongside Justin Tipperick and Tide Byrne and Wyn Jones.
I don't think that Kyle Sinclair's going to go.
No.
I think Xander might get ahead of him.
Yeah, I don't think he should go. He got absolutely gubbed the last game I seen him play.
I don't get the big deal with. I mean, there was going on about the English media was going on about Sinclair and Genge, like, oh, they're so powerful, and their scrummaging technique isn't great. Yes, they are powerful runners. They're very good ball and loose, but there's some discipline issues, particularly with Genge, and I don't think they're particularly good scrummagers.
No,
I don't.
Xander, we pick up Xander on the refs mic saying Genge has dropped it, sir. Aye.
So Genge is quite far down the list here, actually, but Xander's pretty high up.
John Welsh is after him.
How good was that?
For those who didn't see it, Ellis Genge gave some John Welsh he had a word in John Welsh's ear as John Welsh was walking away from him, and John Welsh, junior Glasgow boxing champion, decided to go after Ellis Genge to address it.
Under 14 Scotland national boxing champion, John Welsh. And then do you see afterwards, like Ryan Wilson had tweeted saying, like, "Oh man, Genge is lucky there; he'd get dropped." And everyone starts going, "Oh, it's very unprofessional if you say that, Ryan." I noticed there seemed to be a lot of people from Bristol that thought it was very unprofessional. It's like, no, he didn't say that you should go knock him out. It was just that if Genge tried it with a former Scottish boxing champion, Glaswegian, that's probably not going to end well for you.
Yeah.
And Genge did absolutely a brick.
So
he flinched. He deserved 2 for flinching. He was
2 for flinching. I've not heard that in ages.
Old school, man.
So unfortunately, Jamie Ritchie has the same odds for going on tour as Simon Bergen.
Oof. No, actually, now bear with me on this. I think there's something to be. I do wonder, and I think it will depend on the squad size that they decide to take. But I think that Townsend and Tandy being there in the room it improves chances of our the kind of Lions fringe players that we might have had, especially someone like Jamie Ritchie, who is a future Lion or potentially a future Lion, and he's a young guy. He's potentially got another two tours under his belt with the Lions. Three at a push.
He's 23, isn't he?
23.
Based on Iain and John's, he's got 7 tours ahead of him.
But he's somebody that, you know, if you're having that conversation of, we've got a 50-50 call to make here, do we go with the old guy or do we go with the young guy that might come on tour with us in future? Jamie Ritchie gets the nod because, again, you know, you can. I think we talk about how he didn't play very well in the autumn, but ended the Six Nations very well. Well, you've got someone in the room now that can explain the blip, someone in the room that can talk about what he does, and I think that for me kind of helps with those fringe players.
It does, but it doesn't explain why Simon Bergen would be.
No, God, no. Here's my absolute left field call is Cammy Redpath for the Lions.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think I can see that. It depends on the game Warren Gatlin wants to play.
Yeah,
if he wants to actually move the ball at 12.
My thing in favour of that is that Townsend talked about how quickly Cameron Redpath was able to come into Scotland camp, pick up all the kind of plays and all the defence and the attack plans within a week and a half of coming into camp, and then play an absolute stormer in his debut international game against England. And unfortunately, he's got injured. But again, it's not outside the realms of possibility that, again, if you're looking for a dirt track, someone to bring somebody young in as a dirt tracker and hold some tackle bags and get used to the tour, then he's a good shout.
I think it was interesting as well seeing the interview with Finn Russell, actually, when he was asked, so it was before the England game, he was asked about the impact of Cameron Redpath, and he was talking a lot about how he'd just come in and, like, Finn Russell was saying he was learning from him as well. And it was that, I mean, that shows an incredible level of confidence. Like, you're going into a camp for the first time. And let's not forget, he's going into a camp that he maybe had not chosen to go into originally, and that he went with England before. So, you know, there's all these things. Whilst we can laugh about it and stuff, there you know, it is something that might play in a player's mind, but he's clearly just went in there and said, you know what, I'm quite a good rugby player, by the way, and I'm going to kind of just show what I've got. And him and Finn Russell seem to get on really, really well. And I think they are two guys cut from a similar cloth. And I think Cam Redpath's quite keen on trying things. And you saw that right from the off. I mean, his first touch in international rugby is to belt a sensational clearance kick that probably was quite risky. And that if that gets caught in field, there's a lot of space for England to go champing down. But he knew, he's like, you know what, I'm going to find some grass and I'm going to just batter the ball into touch, and whoop, whoop, here we go.
And off its left peg as well, wasn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
So aside Martin Bells, the last question then before we disappear for this evening. Like, so we're not doing hands in the up tonight because everyone knows the collective hands in the up, the whole of Scotland, is that Hamish Watson. You know, Stephen Jones has said that Hamish Watson's lightweight. Stephen
Jones is a complete and utter twat and deserves to be slapped in the coupon.
So Martin Bell, last question for tonight. Martin Bell says, on the Redpath theme and setting aside Louis Rees-Zammit, who do you think are the genuine bolter contenders for the home nations for the tour? I heard that somebody was respected journalists have been banding about names like Blair Cowan. So desperate they are to. So desperate are they to kind of.
I saw one person saying that. I was like, seriously, mine would be Sam Simmons. Just as, because also Warren Gatlin, it would be another. All right, Eddie, go and go and do something with yourself.
Yeah. I think Sam Simmons, maybe from Ireland, he might go as far as to say I mean, I don't even know how many Burns there are now, but like the youngest of the Burns, who's been tearing up trees for Leinster. He could be not Ross Byrne, a younger one than Ross. There's another one. Harry Byrne?
Ed Byrne, the comedian.
I think it's Harry. If there's anybody watching from Ireland, they'll correct me, but I think it's Harry. But yeah, they've got another Byrne at Leinster, and he's been playing very well when filling in during the international window. He was very, very good. It was one of those guys you watch a player and you go, aye, he's got it.
So here's
Hugo
my bolt.
Hugo Keenan's another one.
Keenan's a good shout as well. Yeah.
My bolter. Now, bear with me on this. The
Richie Vernon.
I don't think Scotland are going to. Who?
Richie Vernon.
Richie Vernon. Well, there you go. That's it.
I mean, that's the only bolter there is, really.
I think there's a chance that Scotland don't tour now this summer because there's nothing arranged. There's nothing in place. We've lost Townsend and Tandy. All the players need a rest that aren't going on the Lions tour, so let's just not bother and give everybody a rest. They didn't tour in 2009, so there's precedent for it.
Yep.
So we just sack in the summer tour. Then all the South African based Scottish players get the summer off and go home.
South Africa.
Ollie Kebble, Jaco van der Walt, Pierre Schumann.
I was going to say, when's the school ready?
Third test, Schumann's eligible for. Third test, injury-ravaged Lions squad. Jaco van der Walt starts at fly half. The ultimate geography one, we'll call him.
The geography one.
and he wins the last test with a 60-metre penalty.
Kick,
Won by Pierre Schumann from the scrum.
Aye. So yeah, Pierre Schumann is eligible for the last test, so he'd have to. But stranger things have happened. That's what Shane Williams got called up to the Lions in Australia because he was on holiday in Hong Kong.
That's true. He was over doing press work. He was doing press work for the Lions.
I think Stephen Donald.
Stephen Donald called up from fishing.
Yep. He's out catching whitebait, and then he's like, my shirt doesn't fit anymore.
Yeah. Martin Bell says Pierre Schumann is genuinely a good shout, and he is, but unfortunately the data, given the current schedule, he would only be eligible for the last test.
That's shit. But Kebble's not a bad shout, by the way.
I mean, you've got. I think there might be an argument for some of the South African-born but home nation-based players to get on a tour because of the homesickness element, and the isolation.
I don't know if you disappeared at this point, John, but your camera's off. But we were talking about guys that can play both sides of the scrum, and Kebble can do that. Kebble can play a tight head. He's built more like a tight head, really, isn't he?
He is. He looks like a tight head, doesn't he?
And you say, well, again for the duck trackers, you say, well, here's a guy that's played regularly against all these teams that we're going to come up against in midweek. He'll give a good, counter of himself. He's somebody we want our main guys to be scrumming against, and they'll know what they're up against. So.
Tell you what, potential dirt trackers, all of the Sail Sharks. Apart from Tom Curry.
I'm no longer he's still a dirt tracker. If he gets on tour, that is.
No, he's not getting on tour.
I'm not allowed to mention Montpellier after getting told off for suggesting they had too many South Africans. When I went back and checked their squad, and they still had 8 South Africans in their top 30 players.
That's more than there's going to be England players in the Lions.
Exactly. So
and on that note, were you going to say something, Ian, before we go for this week?
Yeah. Worrying number of people. Well, one of whom was Chris Robshaw. It's his mate. Loads of folks still thinking Joe Marler should go. Joe Marler and Danny Kerr seem to be getting the shout. Yeah,
Danny Kerr.
It's this whole sort of the way to beat South Africa is to beat them up front. You don't beat South Africa up front. You don't beat them up. They're all monsters.
You run round them. That's the thing. You run round them
really fast.
It's like really Empire Strikes Back. How do they bring down the ATATs? Did they mash them down? No, they use the A-wings to wrap the legs up and make them fall over.
Exactly. How do you bring down the Death Star? You don't just fly at it and crash into it.
No,
bury down the surface.
There is no beating them in the race of the shoulder. There's no beating an ATAT in the race of the shoulder. You have to get around it.
Yeah. And that's how, I mean, you look at how Scotland scored their tries in 2018. We will go in a minute. 2018, Scotland scored the tries.
We're back on Star Wars
It was
now.
a trick line out, a trick line out move, and just like that constant offload between Pete Horn and Hugh Jones.
There was about 50 off.
Did they pass to each other about 5 times in that one movement?
It's such a good try.
Sensational. I think we should
really like
end
that
with
shot.
that. Cammy, can you
We'll
find the
end
video of that and play it right now?
well, yeah, if I can find it, I'll stick it on the blog.
Excellent.
Just people can relive it again. But on that note, on that glorious note, that's it from us for this week. We'll be back next week with a review of the women's game, more wild Lions speculation. I'll be asking the guys next week to pick their Lions 15, but they can only pick redheads.
Nice. Bryce Dallas Howard at 10.
Before they actually get into this, I'm going to call it a day. So we're going to go off now and record our Patreon special for the Scotland's hardest players of the 10s and nows. That'll take us about 15 minutes to get through the 2010s hard players. But for the moment, it is goodbye from me and goodbye from John and Ian.
Hey, folks.
Cheery bye.